The girl had always been quiet. People often passed by without noticing her, and that was just the way she liked it. She liked the calm of being in the background, where no one's eyes were on her and no one expected anything. Her small world was filled with the soft sound of piano keys, the ones she had been playing since she was very young. Music was her companion, her secret place, a world where she could speak without words. Every evening, after finishing school and helping with chores at home, she would sit at the old piano in the corner of her living room. The piano was not new. Its wood had scratches, the keys had tiny chips, and the pedals squeaked slightly, but to her it was perfect. It was a friend who had grown with her, who knew all her moods and could turn her feelings into melodies. She had never performed in front of a crowd. Her parents had encouraged her to play, telling her she had talent, but they also knew she was shy. There had been small family gatherings where she played, and people complimented her softly, but nothing bigger. She liked it that way. She did not crave attention. Music was enough. It was safe. It was hers. One afternoon, while she was practicing a gentle melody, her music teacher came into the room with an unexpected look. She seemed excited, but also a little nervous. "I have something for you," she said. "There's an event this weekend, and they want someone to play the piano. They thought of you." At first, she did not respond. She set her hands down from the keys and looked at the teacher, unsure if she had heard correctly. Play in front of people. Real people. People she didn't know. People who might be talking, looking, judging. The thought made her stomach twist. She had never done anything like that before. "It's just a small performance," the teacher added quickly. "They just want some music in the background. Nothing too loud or too long. You can play softly, just enough for people to enjoy." The words sounded like both an invitation and a warning. Play softly. Do not stand out. Do not take attention away. She nodded slowly, unsure how she felt. On one hand, she wanted to say no, to retreat to the safety of her room and her piano. On the other, a small voice inside whispered that maybe she could try. Maybe it could be something new. For the rest of the day, she could not focus on practice. The idea of performing in front of strangers kept running through her mind. What would they think? What if she made a mistake? What if her hands trembled on the keys? Her usual comfort felt far away, replaced by a mixture of fear and curiosity. She knew one thing. If she agreed, there would be no hiding. The next day at school, she could not stop thinking about it. Every sound around Hertha, tapping of pencils, the laughter of classmates, the squeak of shoes on the floor seemed louder than before. She imagined herself on a stage, the piano under her fingers, a crowd of people staring, waiting. She shivered at the thought. Her friends tried to talk to her, but she was distant, lost in her own world. They noticed she seemed nervous, but they didn't know what it was about. She could not explain it yet, not fully. At home that evening, she approached the piano with hesitant steps. She pressed a few keys softly, letting the sound fill the room. The familiar melody came out, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. Her worries faded, replaced by the music. She realized that if she could trust her music, maybe she could find courage too. She tried playing the melody differently, experimenting with small changes, testing what would feel comfortable if she had to play in front of people. She played softly as instructed, imagining strangers in the room listening, imagining them appreciating the gentle notes without clapping too loudly or looking too closely. As the weekend approached, the event grew closer in her mind. She saw it everywhere in her dreams, in her daydreams at school, in her thoughts while walking home. She rehearsed silently in the mornings, tapping her fingers on desks, humming melodies under her breath. She began to notice little details in her practice. How the timing felt, how her fingers moved, how the music could express a feeling without words. She began to understand that even if the audience did not notice her, the music could still carry her emotions. She began to feel a quiet excitement beneath her fear. Finally, the day arrived. She woke early, her heart beating fast. Her parents gave her encouraging smiles, their words gentle. They reminded her that she did not have to do more than she was comfortable with. They reminded her to breathe. As she dressed, she chose simple clothes, nothing that would attract attention, nothing flashy. She wanted to be invisible and still be heard. She carried her small bag, her sheet music, and a sense of nervous anticipation. Each step toward the event felt heavier, but also purposeful. She knew she was stepping into something unfamiliar, but she also knew she had to try. The venue was not large. It was a community hall with chairs set up in rows, people talking quietly, some moving about, some sitting with cups of coffee. She could hear faint laughter and the hum of conversation. She felt small as she entered, the sounds of strangers pressing on her. She looked at the piano set up in the corner of the room, its polished surface reflecting the light from the windows. It was not her piano, not the one she had grown up with, but it was still a friend in a way. She walked slowly toward it, her hands brushing the keys lightly, testing the feel. It was different, unfamiliar, but she could manage. She could make it speak. The organizer approached her with a friendly smile. "We are so glad you could do this. Just play softly, make it gentle, something that creates a nice atmosphere. Nothing too long. You'll do fine." The words felt both reassuring and constraining. Play softly, do not take attention, do not stand out. She nodded politely, trying to mask the trembling inside. As people continued to settle in, she sat at the piano bench, adjusted her posture, and closed her eyes briefly. She thought about all the evenings she had spent alone with music, all the times she had practiced in secret, all the melodies that had been her voice. Now, for the first time, that voice would reach others. She felt a surge of something she had never felt before, mix of fear, hope, and determination. She opened her eyes, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. She began to play softly, exactly as asked. The music was gentle, delicate, careful. She could hear the murmur of the audience, the sound of chairs shifting, the faint tapping of fingers on cups. At first, she thought they were not paying attention, that she was just background noise. But slowly, something changed. The notes she played, so familiar to her, started to fill the room in a way she had never noticed before. The people around her grew quiet. Heads turned, conversations stopped. She did not know it yet, but her quiet, careful playing was beginning to reach them. For the first time, she felt that music could speak louder than words, and that even someone who tried to be invisible could leave a mark as she continued to play. The girl noticed the room slowly changing around her. At first, people had been whispering, their attention elsewhere, some scrolling on their phones, some talking quietly in corners. But her music began to draw them in. The notes were soft, but they had a presence, a gentle insistence that made people stop and listen without realizing it. She could feel the shift even before looking up, the air becoming calmer, the chatter fading. The hall was still not completely silent, but it felt like it was holding its breath. Despite this, she could feel a tight knot in her stomach. Every sound seemed louder, now the squeak of the piano bench, the soft shuffle of feet on the floor, the faint cough from someone in the back. Her hands trembled slightly, and she had to concentrate hard to keep them steady. Memories of past mistakes in her practice room flashed through her mind, hitting wrong notes, tripping over rhythms, losing confidence. She thought about what the teacher had said, about playing softly, about being careful. What if she failed in front of everyone now? What if her music wasn't good enough? She took a slow, deep breath and let her fingers glide over the keys again. This time, she focused less on perfection and more on feeling. She remembered why she loved music in the first place, not for applause, not for recognition, but for the way it made her feel alive. She let the melody flow, each note carrying a little of her fear, a little of her hope, and all of her determination. For the first time, she realized that the music didn't belong just to her, it belonged to anyone who would listen. Anyone who needed to hear something real. The audience began to respond subtly. A few people leaned forward, their eyes on her hands as they moved over the keys. Some stopped whispering, some put their phones down, and a quiet stillness spread across the hall. She couldn't see everyone, but she could feel it. Every note seemed to reach someone, even if only in a small way. She felt a flicker of confidence. Maybe she could do this. Still, doubt lingered. She wondered if she was doing too much, if she should go back to playing quietly and safely. The thought almost made her stop, but she pressed on. She realized that the music had a life of its own now, something that could not be controlled completely. It was no longer just a reflection of her practice, it was speaking for her, even when she was scared. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. She remembered the advice of a distant relative who had once said, "Music is honest. It doesn't lie. If it comes from you, people will feel it." Those words felt true now. Even if the audience judged her, even if someone thought she was overstepping, she knew the music was real. She let herself sink into it, letting her emotions guide her fingers rather than her fear as the piece continued. She began to add small variations, little touches that she had never dared to play before. A subtle crescendo here, a delicate pause there. She watched, out of the corner of her eye, as people's faces slowly changed. The expressions of mild curiosity turned into surprise, some into admiration. She was no longer just filling background noise. She was creating something that demanded attention, something alive, and yet it still felt intimate. Like she was sharing a secret with everyone who was listening. Her heart raced, but not from fear alone. There was excitement too, the kind of excitement that comes when you discover something new about yourself. When you realize that you are capable of more than you imagined. Each note became a small victory. Each chord, a statement that she could be brave, even if just for a moment. Even if she was supposed to play softly, she felt a quiet strength building inside her. She began to understand that the music could carry her beyond the limits she had imposed on herself. Suddenly, she noticed a young child near the front, eyes wide and completely absorbed in her playing. The child's mother gently tried to quiet him, but he did not move. He was staring at her hands, fascinated. The sight made her smile slightly. If just one person was listening, really listening, then she had done something important. She did not need the applause, the praise, or the recognition. She needed connection, and in that moment, she felt it. The music began to swell. The soft notes she had started with slowly grew. It's not loud enough to break the instruction to be gentle, but enough to show the depth of her talent. She experimented with subtle changes in rhythm, small shifts in timing, letting the melody breathe naturally. Her hands moved with more confidence, more fluidity. She was no longer just playing. She was expressing, telling a story without words. A story that everyone in the room could understand if they chose to listen. Even as she grew more confident, she remained aware of the people around her. Some were still whispering, but most had stopped. A few faces showed surprise, as if they had underestimated her. Some older people in the back smiled quietly, clearly touched by the music. A man near the door leaned on the wall, his eyes closed, letting the sound wash over him. She did not know any of their stories, but she felt that the music was connecting them. Even in small, invisible ways, she began to lose track of time. The room, the people, the event itself faded into the background. There was only her and the piano and the sound she was creating. It was a strange sensation, to feel so exposed and yet so safe at the same time. She realized that fear and courage could exist together, that being nervous did not mean being weak. She could be scared and still create something beautiful. She could be uncertain and still make a difference. Her mind drifted briefly to her parents, who had supported her quietly for years, never pushing her too hard, never asking for more than she could give. She wished they were there, really there, to see this. She imagined their faces, the pride that would quietly shine in their eyes. That thought gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She played with even more care, letting each note carry not just her feelings, but the love and support she had felt growing up. The melody shifted again, becoming slightly more complex, testing her skills. She hesitated for a moment, then remembered all the hours she had spent practicing alone. Every wrong note she had corrected, every difficult piece she had struggled with. Every time she had stayed after practice to perfect a passage, all of it had led to this moment. She let her hands move naturally, trusting her memory and her instincts. The music flowed smoothly, the piece she had known for years taking on a new life in front of real people. The audience's reaction became more evident. Heads turned more frequently, eyes focused intently on her fingers. Some people whispered softly to one another, trying to comment without breaking the moment. Others simply watched, completely captivated. She could feel their attention, but she did not let it overwhelm her. She used it, letting it guide her, letting it fuel her confidence. A few minutes later, she noticed a slight shift in the atmosphere. The room, once filled with casual chatter, had become silent except for the music. She felt a strange mixture of pride and vulnerability. The soft piano had transformed the space. People who expected background music were now listening, fully present. Some were leaning forward, some had relaxed into their seats, and a few were even closing their eyes, letting the sound take them somewhere else. Her fingers moved faster now, more confidently, but still controlled. She introduced subtle dynamics, slight changes in tempo, delicate pauses that made the piece feel alive. The hall responded in its own way, the silence almost reverent. She realized then that playing softly did not mean being unnoticed. Softness could command attention, could move hearts, could create impact without needing to be loud. Time passed, though she did not notice. Each note became a statement of her courage, each chord a reflection of her determination. She was no longer just a quiet girl playing in the corner. She was a musician, a storyteller, someone who could reach others without speaking. Her music spoke for her, and she felt a quiet joy in that truth. By the end of the piece, she could sense the audience's reaction, even before the final notes faded. People were leaning forward, their faces showing surprise and admiration. Some clapped softly, some simply sat in stunned silence, unsure what to do. She had done what she had never imagined possible. She had captivated strangers, made them feel something real, all while staying true to herself. She slowly lifted her hands from the keys, feeling the echo of the final notes linger in the air. Her heart was racing, but it was no longer fear. It was exhilaration. She realized she had crossed an invisible line, stepping out of the background and into her own light, even if just for a few minutes. And she knew deep inside that this was only the beginning of something new, something that she would never forget. As the girl continued playing, she began to notice something extraordinary. The room that had seemed so ordinary before, with its chairs and quiet chatter, now felt transformed. The music she created filled the space, and every sound seemed sharper, every breath from the audience noticeable. She realized that the melody, soft and gentle at first, was no longer just music. It was a story, one that spoke of her fears, her hopes, her quiet courage. Her hands moved naturally, as if the piano and her were sharing a secret language. She no longer needed to think about every note. They flowed from her instinct, her emotion guiding her fingers. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, replaced by focus. Her heart was racing, but not in fear. It was anticipation, excitement, and an unexpected thrill. For the first time, she sensed that people were not just hearing her music. They were feeling it. Heads turned, eyes followed her hands, faces softened, and some even closed their eyes. The room was still quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was attentive, respectful, and alive. She began to experiment, gently at first, with variations in tempo and dynamics. A soft trill here, a delicate pause there. Each little change allowed the music to breathe, and she could feel how the audience responded. There were subtle shifts in posture, quiet nods, and small expressions of surprise and delight. She was no longer merely playing a piece. She was communicating with everyone in the room. The notes she had practiced alone for so many hours were now alive, carrying emotions that she had never dared to express openly. Her mind wandered briefly to all times she had hidden her talent. She remembered classmates who laughed at her quiet demeanor, teachers who expected nothing from the shy girl in the corner, and family gatherings where she was told to keep it short. Those memories, instead of weakening her, fueled her determination. Each note she played was a small victory, a statement that she was not invisible, that her voice, though gentle, mattered. She noticed a few people whispering softly, trying not to interrupt the moment. Some faces were showing genuine surprise. their eyebrows raised as if they had never expected someone so quiet to create such depth. A young woman in the front row smiled, her eyes glistening, and the girl felt a wave of warmth and reassurance. She was connecting with others in a way she had never imagined possible. Even those who had doubted her or assumed she would play merely. Background music were being swept into the story she was telling through sound. As she played, her confidence grew. She let herself take small risks, adding flourishes she had never dared to play in front of anyone. Each careful pause, each soft chord, each gentle crescendo allowed her personality to shine through the music. She began to feel a strange sense of liberation. For so long, she had kept her abilities private, afraid of judgment. But now, as the room listened, she realized that her music could be powerful without being loud, beautiful without being flashy, and captivating without being showy. The melody shifted, becoming more complex. She had always loved this piece, practiced it many times, yet it felt new in this moment. Her fingers glided over the keys with increasing certainty. She began to lose track of herself, of her fears, and even of time. All that mattered was the music, the connection it created, and the way it transformed the ordinary room into something alive. Every chord, every note, became a reflection of her courage and vulnerability combined. The audience's reaction became even more evident. People who had been seated casually were leaning forward, their attention fully captured. Eyes followed her hands, some people softly exhaling in awe. She could feel their energy, even without seeing it directly. Their stillness, their presence, told her that she was no longer merely filling the air with sound. She was creating an experience, a shared moment that transcended words. Her hands moved faster now, more confidently, yet with care. She had never felt music flow like this before. Each passage, each arpeggio, felt natural and effortless, even though it was technically challenging. She realized that her years of quiet practice had prepared her for this very moment. All the mistakes she had corrected alone, all the hours she had spent perfecting difficult passages, and all the patience she had cultivated came together seamlessly. It was as if the piano had become an extension of herself, and she could express everything she had held inside for so long. The girl allowed herself a small smile, noticing the subtle but visible signs of emotion in the audience. An older man in the back had tears in his eyes, a teenage boy nodded softly, clearly impressed, and the young child from earlier sat with his mouth slightly open, captivated. She realized then that music was more than notes and timing. It was emotion, connection, and presence. And in that moment, she understood that her music had reached people in ways she could never have anticipated. The piece continued, its intensity growing naturally. She introduced delicate contrasts, gentle crescendos followed by soft, reflective pauses. Each movement told a story, a narrative without words. She was telling the story of a quiet girl who had hidden her talent, who had been underestimated, and who is now emerging with grace and courage. The audience, fully absorbed, became part of the story, reacting subtly yet profoundly. She could feel their breath, their focus, their silent acknowledgement of what she was giving them. Time seemed to stretch. She was aware of the clock, but not in a stressful way. Every note, every chord was carefully considered, yet she was also lost in the flow. The piano allowed her to express feelings she had never articulated before. Her fear had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed into energy, into determination, into beauty. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. She remembered the advice of her teacher, of her parents, and of her own inner voice. Play softly, yes, but let the music breathe. Play cautiously, but let your heart speak. She balanced these lessons expertly, guiding her fingers with care while allowing her emotions to shape the sound. She had begun with the expectation of being soft, restrained, and careful, but she discovered that softness could carry power and that restraint could highlight depth. Her performance was becoming a revelation not just to the audience, but to herself. The energy in the room subtly shifted once more. People who had been tentative, unsure, or distracted were now fully present. Some were leaning forward, eyes wide, fully immersed. Some whispered softly to neighbors, trying to express surprise without interrupting the music. Others simply sat, completely absorbed, letting the sound wash over them. The girl noticed it all, sensing the impact she was having, though she did not let it distract her from the music. As she reached the middle section of the piece, she began to feel a surge of exhilaration. This was no longer a test or an obligation. It was an opportunity to express herself fully. She felt alive, fully engaged, and completely connected to the piano. Her fingers danced across the keys, executing complex passages with fluidity and grace. Every note was infused with intention. Every chord resonated with emotion. She could feel the music extending beyond herself, touching the people in the room, creating a shared experience that was intimate and profound. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting herself be completely present. She felt the subtle vibrations under her fingers, the resonance of each chord, the way the melody flowed seamlessly. She imagined the faces of those listening, their reactions, their surprise, their admiration. It gave her courage. She realized that the music was no longer hers alone. It belonged to anyone who heard it, anyone who felt it, and that realization filled her with quiet pride. As the piece approached its final section, she added delicate embellishments, gentle variations, and subtle dynamic shifts. Each note was carefully placed, yet imbued with spontaneity. She could feel the audience leaning in, fully attentive. The room seemed to shrink, becoming an intimate space where only the music and the shared emotions mattered. She played with a freedom and confidence that she had never known, understanding that her quiet strength could command attention without raising her voice. Finally, she reached the last chords. She let them linger, allowing the sound to fill the space fully before gently fading away. The room remained silent for a heartbeat longer than expected. Then, slowly, almost reverently, people began to applaud. The applause was soft at first, then grew steadily. She looked up, slightly surprised, and saw the expressions on the faces of those around her. Admiration, awe, delight. She had done more than play softly. She had captured hearts, transformed a quiet moment into a powerful shared experience, and revealed a depth of talent that no one had anticipated. She lifted her hands from the keys, her heart still racing, but not from fear. It was exhilaration, pride, and joy. She realized that she had crossed an invisible threshold. She had stepped out of the shadows, shared her gift, and touched people in a way she had never imagined. She understood now that music could speak louder than words, that even the quietest voice could leave a lasting impression, and that courage and vulnerability could create something truly unforgettable. As the girl played on, the music began to take on a life of its own. What had started as soft, careful notes was now growing, subtly but unmistakably, into something powerful and vibrant. Her hands moved with confidence, guided by instinct and emotion, each chord resonating with a depth she had never realized was possible. She felt herself slipping into a rhythm where fear and hesitation no longer existed. It was only her, the piano, and the story unfolding through the music. Every note seemed to echo in the room, touching those listening in ways words never could. The audience, initially curious but detached, was now entirely captivated. People leaned forward, their eyes fixed on her fingers. They were no longer thinking about their conversations, their phones, or anything else. They were here, fully present, immersed in something magical that had quietly entered their world. She noticed their expressions, the widening of eyes, the soft gasps, and gentle smiles. Each subtle reaction fueled her further, though she did not need it. The music itself was enough to drive her forward. A surge of emotion swept through her as she realized the significance of what she was doing. For years she had been quiet, overlooked, underestimated, and told to keep her abilities modest. But now, in this very moment, she was expressing herself fully, unrestrained by the fears that had held her back. She allowed herself to play more freely, letting her emotions shape every note. The music became a bridge between her inner world and the outside. Connecting hearts without a single word, her fingers danced across the keys, shifting effortlessly between soft, reflective passages and slightly more intense, expressive chords. She introduced subtle flourishes, delicate runs that added layers to the melody. The audience responded intuitively, some leaning even closer, some closing their eyes to savor the emotion, others exchanging glances of astonishment. The child who had been captivated earlier now clutched the edge of his seat, completely absorbed. The effect of her music was undeniable. It had grown from a private expression into a shared experience. And she felt a quiet triumph. She noticed that even the organizers, who had asked her to play softly and cautiously, were watching intently. There was surprise in their eyes, perhaps even admiration. It occurred to her that they too had underestimated her, and it gave her a small thrill, not a prideful one, but a simple satisfaction in showing what could happen when someone trusted themselves and their abilities. She did not need to prove anything to anyone, yet the recognition of her skill was a subtle but powerful affirmation. The music continued to build, each phrase more confident than the last. She allowed herself small improvisations, testing the waters of expression she had never dared explore. Each variation, each unexpected touch, seemed to enchant the audience further. She could feel the room responding. The atmosphere had shifted completely. The once ordinary space had become intimate, alive with shared energy. Every note carried emotion, and every chord echoed with a sense of connection that was palpable. Her heart pounded, not with anxiety but with exhilaration. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced. It was as if the music had opened a door to a world she had kept locked inside herself for too long. The audience, in their silence, became part of the story she was telling. They were witnesses, participants, and co-creators of the moment, their presence giving the music its weight and meaning. She realized then that performing wasn't about showing off. It was about sharing, about opening a space where emotion could travel freely between people. The melody shifted once more, moving toward its most expressive part. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and feeling, each note carefully placed but full of spontaneity. She experimented with dynamics, subtle crescendos, and soft decrescendos that gave the piece a natural flowing quality. The music rose and fell, gentle yet commanding, creating a narrative that was invisible yet palpable. The audience leaned in, completely entranced. The initial murmurs and distractions completely vanished. She noticed a few subtle tears among the listeners, some visible, some hidden, and realized the depth of impact her music was having. She was reaching people in ways she had never imagined. Every pause, every gentle touch of a key seemed to resonate with their emotions. She had started the day with anxiety and hesitation, uncertain if anyone would even notice her playing. Now, she was transforming the room with her music, touching hearts without a single word. The realization made her smile quietly to herself, a smile mixed with humility and joy. Her mind briefly wandered to the countless hours of private practice that had led to this moment. She thought of the small apartment where she had spent evenings alone with her piano, the empty rooms where she had practiced passages over and over, the mistakes she had corrected, and the patience she had developed. Every second of preparation had contributed to this moment. She understood then that talent alone was not enough. It was persistence, love for the craft, and a willingness to face fear that had brought her here. As she played, she felt the music guiding her, leading her beyond the boundaries of caution. She introduced new dynamics, gentle yet deliberate, exploring subtle nuances she had only imagined in private. Each chord she played was infused with emotion, carrying the essence of her story. The audience responded in kind, their reactions instinctive and heartfelt. She could feel the energy in the room, the quiet awe, the emotional resonance. For the first time, she truly understood the power of music as a universal language. Capable of connecting people across any boundary, her confidence soared. Yet, she remained mindful of the gentle touch that had been her instruction. She realized that power did not need to be loud. Subtlety could captivate, softness could command attention, and delicacy could move hearts. The music flowed like a river, graceful, continuous, and alive. She felt herself completely present, entirely immersed in the moment. The fear that had gripped her at the beginning was now transformed into focused energy, a force that propelled her forward. The audience's reactions became more pronounced. Some people were leaning forward, eyes wide, absorbing every note. Others sat silently, lost in thought, their expressions showing subtle amazement. She noticed a young woman in the back wiping her eyes discreetly, clearly moved by the music. The girl's heart swelled with a mix of humility and pride. She realized that she was not performing for herself alone. She was creating a shared emotional experience, a moment of genuine human connection. As the piece approached its climax, she allowed herself to play with complete abandon. Within the soft boundaries she had established, her hands moved fluidly, expressing a range of emotions she had never dared to show publicly. The music became a dialogue between her and the audience, each note a sentence, each chord a paragraph, weaving a story that transcended words. She was no longer merely playing. She was communicating, creating, connecting in a way that felt almost sacred. The energy in the room intensified, not with volume, but with presence. The once muted audience now radiated attention and appreciation. The shared silence became a canvas for the music, each listener contributing unconsciously to the experience. The girl felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her quiet courage had led to this transformation. She had started softly, with hesitation, but she had created something far more profound than anyone could have expected. The final notes of the piece approached, delicate yet resonant. She allowed them to linger, savoring the last moments of connection, the subtle resonance that filled the room. The audience remained still, reluctant to break the spell. Then, gradually, soft applause began, growing steadily as people recognized the depth and skill of her performance. Faces that had been skeptical now reflected genuine admiration. Some stood quietly, still in awe of the experience they had just witnessed. The room had been transformed. She had been the instrument of that change. She lifted her hands from the keys, her heart racing not with fear but with exhilaration and satisfaction. The girl realized she had done more than play softly. She had created a profound emotional experience, one that connected her to every person in the room. Her quiet determination, her patience, and her love for music had culminated in a moment of shared humanity. She had transformed not only the music, but also the space and the people within it. In that instant, she understood the true power of courage, vulnerability, and artistry, and how even the softest voice could ignite something extraordinary. The final notes of the performance lingered in the air, delicate and powerful at the same time. The girl slowly lifted her hands from the keys, feeling an unfamiliar mix of exhaustion, exhilaration, and satisfaction. Her heart was still racing, but it was no longer filled with fear. The fear that had clutched her at the beginning was replaced by a quiet, glowing pride. She looked around the room, seeing faces she had never known before, yet each one reflecting the impact of her music in their own way. Some had tears quietly glistening in their eyes, some were nodding in approval, and a few were still frozen in stunned silence, unsure how to express the emotions her playing had stirred. For a moment, she allowed herself to just breathe and take it all in. She had always imagined performing as something distant and almost unreachable. To her, music had been personal, private, a part of herself that belonged solely to her own ears and heart. Yet here she was, in the presence of strangers, having shared her deepest feelings without a word, and it had reached them. She realized that music had a power beyond notes and timing. It could carry emotion directly to others. She felt humbled and amazed at what had just happened. The room, which had initially felt ordinary and even dull, was now electric with energy and connection. It was as if her music had turned the space into something alive, something that no one would forget. The applause began softly, hesitant at first, and then grew steadily. The sound was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was warm, genuine, and filled with emotion. Some people clapped with restrained hands, not wanting to break the delicate mood, while others stood, giving her a standing ovation. The girl's eyes widened slightly. She had never imagined this. She had played softly, carefully, not wanting to attract attention, yet here she was, commanding it in the most profound way possible. Her quiet courage had transformed into something that could not be ignored. As people began approaching her, offering praise, she felt a mixture of shyness and gratitude. Words were said softly, compliments that highlighted the depth, beauty, and emotion in her playing. Some expressed surprise at how someone so quiet and reserved could convey so much feeling through music. The girl nodded and smiled, still processing the experience. She felt a quiet warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never known before. For the first time, she understood that her talent, combined with her courage to share it, could make a difference in the lives of others. A young woman came forward, her eyes shining with admiration. "I've never felt music like that before," she said softly. "It's like you spoke to all of us without saying a single word. Thank you." The girl felt her chest tighten, a combination of humility and joy washing over her. It was one thing to play music for herself, another entirely to touch people's hearts so deeply. She realized that her music could be more than a private passion. It could become a bridge connecting her to the world around her. The child from the front row, one who had been captivated from the beginning, ran toward her, his small hands clapping. His mother followed, smiling, telling her how amazed he had been. The girl knelt slightly, offering a gentle smile, feeling an innocent happiness that was both simple and profound. This was the tangible result of her courage, the ability to reach others, to move them even in a small way. She realized that impact did not always have to be grand or loud. It could be soft, subtle, and deeply meaningful. She reflected on all the moments that had led to this experience. The years of practice alone in her room, the countless hours perfecting difficult passages, the times she had been overlooked or underestimated. Each of those experiences had shaped her, prepared her, and strengthened her. Now, they had culminated in a moment of shared beauty and connection that she would never forget. She realized that even though she had often stayed quiet and unnoticed, her voice, when expressed through her music, could resonate more powerfully than she had ever imagined. As the room slowly settled, the organizers approached her. Their smiles were wide, and their admiration was unmistakable. "We were expecting soft background music," one of them said, "but what you did went far beyond that. You held everyone's attention. You created something extraordinary." The girl felt a sense of validation, yet it was different from what she had imagined. It was not about